Special Ordinance Committee meeting to order. It's the continuation of last week's meeting from April 14th.
Do we give this to you?
Ms. Clerk, is there any changes or?
I'm going to do attendance first. I
Okay.
know we're all here, but just we can
That's
put it on record. Councilmember Jordan,
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Here.
Chair Gutierrez.
Present.
Thank you.
Are there any changes to?
No changes to the agenda, Chair.
Okay, any general public comment not related to this specific item? No? All right. Since we had to continue this item during public comment, I'm going to reopen the public comment period, but limit it to 2 minutes per speaker for the sake of time. And we are going to accept public comment slips up until 11:45, so you have about 15 minutes to turn one in if you want to continue speaking. At that time, we'll close the public comment period so that we can get down to deliberating. All right.
Chair Gutierrez, just let me make an announcement. For those who are listening online, if you would like to speak on this item, you have 15 minutes to raise your hand. Please raise your hand by 11:45. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, can we have our first speaker?
Our first speaker is going to be Eve Leeds.
Was it you that's going to do this for me?
Oh, I'll get your slips. Thank you. Just leave them there.
Thank you for hearing me today. I live in Yankee Farm, and I'm here representing at least 20 of my neighbors who cannot be here because they are either at their jobs, caring for their families, or they are elderly. Our community of around 70 homes is located in a designated high fire hazard zone by the city and the county. And what makes our situation distinct is that we have only one narrow road for both entry and evacuation, which severely limits our capacity in an emergency, which you can see by the map there that I've given you as far as how many STRs there are, and that one single road, and also, how many homes need to be driven out in an evacuation. So there is a reason we have been designated high fire. In wind-driven conditions, along with the topography of the surrounding hillsides and dense vegetation, fire in this area would not be easy to contain, and it would not necessarily remain isolated. So this concerns far more than just our Yankee Farm folks worrying about getting out of a narrow, tiny single road. I understand that there are arguments about tax revenue and economic benefit, but those need to be weighed against public safety constraints in high-risk, limited access areas like Yankee Farm. This decision affects the safety and well-being of the many neighborhoods, not just of Yankee Farm. It's the broader Santa Barbara community, and not just a relatively small number of short-term rental operators. I also want to note that as recently as June of 2024, and that's the next piece of paper, I wanted to put this up on the screen, but it wasn't working. Allison DeBusk presented, we had a whole presentation, it's on the videos, but this other slide shows that in 2022 it was discussed that high fire zones would be excluded. In 2024 it was also discussed the same way. Does that mean my time is up? Okay, well, I'm just hoping to do home shares with a targeted approach with some very high fire safety provisions for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Craig Leeds, followed by Daryl Bernstein.
I didn't know my wife's speech. She kind of stole a lot of my thunder. I just want to mention the thing I fear most is public speaking. I'd rather have a root canal right now than talk in front of you. But it's an important thing, so I'm going to do it anyway. And yes, as my wife said, we live in Yankee Farm, which is a high fire hazard area. And there are 70 houses there with just the one-lane road to evacuate, and then Cliff Drive, which is pretty bad in itself. And there's several STRs in our neighborhood, and 3 of them directly around us. I want to say that The STRs amplify the risk of wildfire here incredibly. Short-term renters don't have the same motivation as regular residents on being safe for fires. They sometimes have outdoor fires and they light fireworks. Even their unfamiliarity with stoves and barbecues and fire pits adds to the danger. And on top of that, there are food trucks and party buses that block our driveways. I live in fear that we won't be able to evacuate when a fire is started. A fire here will easily blast through the chaparral of Campanile Hill over into Hidden Valley, and who knows where else. With your proposed new ordinance to restrict unhosted short-term rentals, you have the capability to avoid another Palisades fire that burned almost 7,000 homes. I would like to see all STRs restricted in single-family residential neighborhoods, but at least restrict them in neighborhoods in high fire zones. Finally, the STRs that operate around us operate as party houses, which also increases the risk due to careless behavior, especially when they're drunk. They charge $2,000 or more per night, and when this in no way aligns with the Coastal Commission's desire for low and middle income housing. So there's no way that is of value, and removing the STRs would add to the housing stock without impacting the Coastal Commission's
Thank you very
desires.
much.
Daryl Bernstein, followed by Dave Hopkins.
Good morning. I've lived on the Mesa for 25 years. I've owned a home in peace up until the last couple of years. We have 5 of these loophole STRs on our street and just around the corner adjacent to us out of, let's say, roughly 20 homes on our street. We have, in particular, one very problem STR across the street that's had numerous parties and noise complaints. We've had police calls, and it's created a lot of commotion. The STR proponents here mentioned the importance of having STRs in our neighborhoods to host event gatherings and accommodate traveling families. I appreciate those arguments. That definitely fills a business need in the marketplace, but this is really exactly the problem. We've had just an endless parade of SUVs unloading groups of bachelorette parties, bachelor parties, graduation parties. These are all noble events, but they don't belong in our neighborhoods where we're trying to live peacefully. I have friends on the other side of this issue. I'm empathetic to that. I appreciate their entrepreneurial spirit. I'm also an entrepreneur. I've created many jobs in Santa Barbara. However, all of them downtown in commercial districts, not running an active business in my neighborhood. Our single-family neighborhood is for living, forming community, supporting our children, family, elderly people on our street. I ask you to please have the confidence to proceed with this ordinance in its current form and prohibit STRs in single-family zones in the coastal areas. Our Santa Barbara neighborhoods are really special places. We trust in you as our elected officials to protect our peace, serenity, quality of life in our homes, and not allow our streets to become busy hotel districts, which is not what any of us intended moving into Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Dave Hopkins, followed by Annette Graham. Dave Hopkins. Annette Graham.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. I can piggyback on what Mr. Bernstein has said. We have, since we've moved to our forever home on the Mesa in 2019, where we were warmly welcomed by our existing neighbors, we have been experiencing an inundation of short-term rentals. And I don't know if they're legal. I don't know if they're paying their bed tax. I doubt it. But I want to talk about something that nobody's talking about. I met a young man while I was out walking my dog. He is an adolescent psychiatrist. He works for Cottage Hospital. His wife is a rheumatologist. They have one small child. They were renting on the West Mesa, and they were desperately trying to find a home. And these houses, they would put in offers, and they'd get snatched up before they even had an opportunity to get it. I know Cottage was giving them a tremendous amount of money as a stipend to be able to buy the home. They still couldn't do it. I know they finally did get one on Palisades Drive, thank goodness, where they're going to raise their small child. And And I just think that we need more doctors than we do tourists. We need more neighbors than we do tourists. And at some point, as our elected officials, the stewards of our community, we need to ask you to really step up for the community. The other thing is, the Coastal Commission was designed in 1972 out of the oil disaster that happened in 1969, and their charter was to save the coast. That didn't mean disrupt the communities that have been there since 1950. So I think that, they're not in the hospitality business. They're supposed to be in preserving the coastline. And Santa Barbara, unlike any other city on the coast, has provided ample parking, multiple ways to get down to the ocean, and we have a tremendous amount of hotels that are fabulous. I'd suggest for bachelorette parties, they go to the Milo. So-
Thank you.
Hillary Wells, followed by Bill Stark.
My name's Hillary Wells, and I spoke last time. I'm the person who brought my copy of my certificate, tax certificate, which required that I prove that we were living in the Upper Mesa in the coastal zone. It literally says coastal zone on my certificate. But the reason I'm speaking again now is I believe that there's a lot of confusion about what a home share actually is. And I find that it's impossible to imagine that you're actually going to be able to make up the tot by having people who are already living there in tiny little houses oftentimes in the Mesa, bring in other people who are going to be living with them without having a tremendously difficult time regulating it, not to mention just the congestion and additional cars and the impact it's going to have on the community. On top of that, I'm wondering how it's going to work if there's problems with the host who perhaps is a pedophile who wants to have children and families join. Is there any chance that the city is going to be liable if you're offering licenses and providing accommodations that require incredibly close proximity? What happens if somebody walks into a bathroom at night? Are the walls thin? I don't think you'll find hosts that are interested in doing this. We certainly would never do it. And I also don't think you'll have any possibility of having more than a few people who would find that kind of accommodation attractive. So the fact that you have maps that are all green of all the people that are going to make up all this tot, I have probably paid close to $100,000 in the last 4 years in tot. And that's something that counts. The city needs the money. I'm very, very conscientious. We regulate and have strict rules, so our location should be not affecting anyone.
Thank you.
Bill Stark, followed by Erwin Green. And just a reminder, public comment for submitting those slips will be closed at 11:45. For those listening online, please raise your hand at this time if you're going to speak on this item. Thank you.
My name is Bill Stark, and I'm responding to some claims made by STR advocates during last week's meeting. We heard that the number of reported claims is very small. We heard that any complaints are addressed promptly. But by the time a nuisance rises to the level that prompts a complaint, the peace of the neighborhood has already been disturbed. When this happens in the middle of the night, your sleep has already been interrupted. You've already had to get up, go talk to the people next door, or call the property manager, or call the police. This may never turn into a reported complaint, but your night's sleep may have already been ruined. And next weekend, the same thing may happen again with different people. STR advocates claim STRs will provide affordable alternatives to motels, but current listings on Airbnb do not support that claim. In fact, STRs on the Mesa appear to be every bit as expensive as motels, if not more so. The only way STRs can even approach comparable affordability is by filling them with the maximum number of guests, which only increases the likelihood of noise disturbances. These STRs are like mini motels where everybody stays in one room. STRs are not appropriate on parcels zoned for residential use. STRs are appropriate in the same areas that are zoned for motels. We've heard from a number of property owners and managers last week claiming that theirs are well-run and responsible businesses. This may very well be true. Unless these owners and property managers live on or next door to their properties, though, they do not live with the immediate impacts their businesses have on the neighbors. The Cracky decision paralyzed the city's enforcement efforts, but STR restrictions remained on the books while a new ordinance was being drafted. Some owners took advantage of the enforcement vacuum to set up STRs, hoping to have them grandfathered in. Please don't allow this to happen. Thank you.
Erwin Green, followed by Theo Cracky.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. My name is Erwin Green. My wife and I, Michelle, we've been renting an Airbnb in the coastal zone in our home on the Mesa. Our home has been remodeled and re-landscaped, and we feel it's one of the most beautiful homes in the neighborhood. We have put a lot of finances into it, a lot of physical effort to make it look beautiful. We spend a lot of time continuing to maintain it. It certainly enhances the neighborhood. Our home does not fall into the category of low-income housing. We aren't a corporation. We're a small-scale family business. This is our livelihood. We are offering a service to visitors and families that hotels cannot offer. Most of our guests and families, grandparents, getting to know and spend time with their grown children and the grandchildren, where they can enjoy family time in a place of a homey atmosphere. We carefully screen all our guests before allowing them to stay in our home. We are very strict about rules and no parties whatsoever, quiet hours, and limit the number of guests allowed. We have not had one complaint, not one, from any of our neighbors. They appreciate having a well-maintained home in their neighborhood. Our guests are also extremely appreciative of the opportunity to be able to stay in this type of accommodation in Santa Barbara, and especially to enjoy the location. Our home has drawn guests to Santa Barbara because of the type of accommodation and the particular location. Tourists are important to Santa Barbara, and they bring much needed income. In addition, we have a business license, and we have paid the transient occupancy tax from day one. It's a great source of income for the city as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Theo Cracky, followed by Samantha Ireland.
Good morning. My name is Theo Cracky, and I appreciate the opportunity to further share my concerns regarding the proposed short-term rental ordinance. When I spoke last week, I highlighted the inaccuracy of the estimated loss of transient occupancy tax revenue under this proposal, and I urged you to consider the potential impact on city services if this critical source of funding is reduced by approximately 70%. Today, I want to underscore several key points that deserve closer attention. Number one, it is downright bad policy to not have a grandfathering in provision for the responsible STR operators who, since 2019, have complied with existing regulations and have been paying millions in transient occupancy tax. Number two, the draft ordinance references a new short-term rental registration fee, but does not specify the amount nor provide any supporting data to justify how such a fee would be determined. I think that's really important for you guys to have that information before you move forward. Number three, there is no consideration of alternative regulatory approaches, such as cap-based, density-based, or lottery-based systems, all of which seem to be more fair and which have been adopted by most California coastal cities. Finally, number four, there is no clear data demonstrating that homestays would realistically replace the visitor serving capacity currently provided by coastal zone short-term rentals. In its current form, the ordinance is incomplete and not sufficiently supported by actual data. Advancing it under these conditions risks unintended consequence for locals, traveling families, and of course, city finances. I respectfully urge you to do what an ordinance committee should do when faced with such a deficient draft ordinance, which is to not rush it forward because of some neighbors with nuisance issues, which I completely respect, but that's the main opposition here, and instead to please pause this process, then take the time to do a more thorough, data-driven evaluation before forwarding it to City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Samantha Ireland, followed by Autumn Malanka.
Hi, committee members. I'm Samantha Ireland, and I spoke last week. And I want to just say that I'm not opposed to an ordinance. I think an ordinance is needed. There's been clarity that has been needed for a really long time. And thank you, Laura, for attempting to put this together. I feel like she's worked really hard, but it is not ready yet. It is not ready yet. The planning committee said it's not ready. Tons of people here have said it's not ready. Please rethink it, don't rush it. There's two main reasons it's not ready. One is under the current proposed ordinance, the new area of allowed short-term rentals, which is primarily the East and West Beach and a little bit of downtown, is very, very restrictive. And I know there's a lot of short-term rentals there, but most of those are just operating with a business license. If you require them to go through the process that's outlined in this new ordinance, it's going to be impossible for them to get through because of all the things that have been brought up, like parking and so forth. And proof of that is that only 25 in 9 years homes have been able to get through the process, and it's very similar. So that's not going to provide enough for this town. And secondly, if you think home share with that large green area is going to solve the problem, listen to people who've spoken before. No one wants to share their home with people that are visiting. And if families are the ones that are benefiting from coming and staying in Santa Barbara in a short-term rental, families aren't going to want to share their home with a strange adult. What the person said before. So please, I don't think the Coastal Commission is going to approve this, so don't rush it to City Council and have them approve it just to get declined at Coastal Commission. There is not enough process in here. Please don't rush. Send it back. Thank you.
Autumn Malanka, followed by Tiffany Holler.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm Autumn Malanka. I moved to Santa Barbara about 35 years ago in 1992 to attend UCSB, and I'm one of those lucky alumni who has fought the good fight to stay here. I don't come from a wealthy family, and I've never been gifted family money. So with those realities, staying in a predominantly wealthy town where rent and real estate and cost of living is very high has been a huge challenge. But I was and have continued to be determined to face that challenge in order to live here. I wrote a long history here about how I was able to buy a small 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo in 2005 with my husband. And we had dreams of remodeling it and flipping it like we'd seen many other friends and acquaintances do in order to find a gain. Unfortunately, well, I should reword that. Fortunately, we had a baby boy. And we decided the condo was way too small, there was no yard, it's on a busy street, so we decided it was time to move. And that's when we came into the short-term rental game. The long-term rental option just would not cover mortgage, fees, HOA. So we got into the short-term rental game, and it was a struggle. But we followed every rule. We made sure that all of our neighbors were aware. We were very careful at vetting tenants. And what ended up happening was we ended up doing it for 8 years successfully. We never had a complaint, never had an issue. Very respectful operation. But unfortunately in 2000 and, I don't have the date here, but we ended up having to sell it because we started receiving more and more notices from the city that regulations were changing, we were no longer going to be allowed to continue, so we sold the home. I just wanted to offer a humble perspective here that we lost an investment because of these rules, and I think it's really important to consider that some people are just trying to find their way here in this STR option.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tiffany Holler, followed by Tony Shibata.
Good afternoon, committee members. I wasn't going to speak today, but I just want to bring something up. My name is Tiffany Haller, if I didn't say that already. this system's broken. I'm sorry. I mean, I feel for these people. Both sides. We all just need to have a different system because, you know, if someone is not happy with it on their street, we get it. Let's figure the situation out. But I want to bring up the fact that this whole thing, we have expectations. We bought a house in this neighborhood and we have certain expectations. I bought a house on the Mesa 21 years ago and I had expectations too. I had expectations that there could be renters, there could not, but I did not expect a sober living home to go in across the street from me. I did not expect 10 college students to go in across the street from me. And I didn't expect a property to be built on a generator for the last 3 years with the city doing nothing about it. So there are issues with everything. And some of these speakers that are talking have stayed in our vacation rentals that now have moved from the East Coast and bought these homes. Our prices have gone up, and now they're claiming that they are wanting to save the neighborhood, and that's just not right because I'll tell you, 80% of the properties that we manage are owned by these families for 50-plus years. This is not about changing the neighborhood. It's about them being able to share their properties with their grandchildren and their extended family. So I appreciate that there's this attitude, not in my backyard, but you signed up to buy a home in a tourist destination. This is Santa Barbara. This is not another area, okay? Santa Barbara is a
Quiet,
tourist
please.
destination, and our whole city and businesses depend on tourism. I'm not saying we should ruin neighborhoods. By far, no. I live in the neighborhood. But there's got to be a solution where we can all get together instead of coming and talking and getting angry at these meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me remind the audience that there's no booing or cheering or clapping or hissing or spitting. Thank you.
Tony Shabata, followed by Wally Crosby.
Tony Shabata, bought my house in 2018. And I've been a longtime resident of Ventura County. I went to school in Oxnard, Santa Clara High School. Then I graduated and went to college in San Luis Obispo. Graduated from there. Passing through Santa Barbara, I always loved the city. I remember when the freeway was the traffic stops, if you remember that. That was a nightmare, but we all accepted it, and that's how long every time I stopped, I got to see this beautiful city. I wanted to live here. I don't have the money, but I saved every nickel and dime, bought, like I said, in 2018, and 2 years later, my financial situation changed. I could not afford to keep the house. So the only thing I had as an option was short-term rental. My family still lives in Camarillo, and when the house is rented, I sleep on the couch or I stay in the guest room. But that's the only way I can stay in the town. If this ordinance passes and I have to sleep on the couch in my short-term rental with kids running around me and other people, strangers, it's not going to happen. I'm going to have to sell the house, and that's just the end of it. So I think this ordinance needs to be looked at more closely. The city is struggling for money. Tourism is struggling. State Street is dead. You have the power to revisit this ordinance and increase the tourism that this city desperately needs. I have no complaints from any of my neighbors. In fact, next to me is a daycare center. And if you want to talk about noise, have 8 kids show up from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock screaming and yelling. And while I haven't said anything about that before, I'm saying it now.
Our final speaker in chambers will be Wally Crosby.
Hi. Well, I don't have a whole lot to say other than, there are a lot of circumstances why people do what they do. And we are one of them. We inherited a house on the Mesa, which was in terrible shape. It took us 2 years to fix it up. And we are not rich people. My husband is retired from the school district, and I get Social Security, and that's it. So in the meantime, we got assessed by the city for the property tax, which we never even anticipated. But it was so high that we couldn't even afford living in there. So we rented it more long-term pretty much all this time, till last August, when we had a tenant in there that had a wedding with about 150 people. We didn't know about it. I came to look at the bathroom, and I'm thinking, where are all these people going? And I'm stopping, and they're going into our house. And I'm thinking, holy smoke. So I didn't know what to do. Well, and I didn't want to ruin that lady's wedding either, so we let it go. But last time, there was a lady here that said that the short-term rental people did this wedding. No. She'd been there for over a year. Luckily, her lease was off, but it still took us $10,000 to get her out of our house. So since then, we've been so dramatized that we have not rented the house. Last week, no, a couple of weeks ago, we applied for the transient occupancy tax because right next to us, the people tore out their house. They're building a huge house. On the front, they bought 2 lots. This is all money that my stepfather gave the university, and they immediately sold. We've been putting up for 2 years with this, quote, little farmhouse being built. So now we can't even rent the house anymore. We had a lady that wanted to rent the house. She talked to the superintendent next door, and he said, oh, yeah, for 4 months.
If you can wrap it up, because...
Yeah, you have a lot of noise. Guess what? She said, no, I wouldn't rent this house. So here we are. And that's only one circumstance. I'm sure we're not the general person, but I just wanted you to know there are many circumstances.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Gutierrez will now go to our online public speakers. Our first one will be Stephen Leonard. Stephen Leonard, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the Ordinance Committee. I talked before the City Council last week, so this is going to be a bit of a rerun. I apologize. My name is Steve Leonard, an associate attorney with Angel Law, speaking regarding issues we have with the proposed ordinances. We wrote a comment letter in the record, and I'm here to reinforce some of the points we made in that letter. Based on the analysis in the staff report, these ordinances would eliminate hundreds of short-term rentals, which will have serious human and environmental consequences that should not be taken lightly. We urge the Ordinance Committee to recommend against adoption to give the city more time to bring them into compliance with CEQA, with the city's land use plan, and with the property rights of the people of Santa Barbara. First, adoption of the ordinance violates CEQA. The staff report says the ordinances are exempt from eliminating public environmental review and accountability under CEQA. The staff report bases this finding on a CEQA guideline section that applies only where it can be seen with certainty that there's no possibility that the activity in question may have a significant impact in the environment. But the staff report contains no evidence to support that kind of certainty, despite the seismic shift in the city's accommodations patterns that the ordinances will certainly cause. A project doesn't need to be a big construction site to have environmental effects. By shutting down many hundreds of STRs, these ordinances are pushing visitors to the city out to accommodations outside the city. And the farther you push visitors, the longer they have to drive to get into the city, increasing their air pollutant and greenhouse gas emissions. So an initial study is appropriate and necessary to meet CEQA's goals of careful deliberation, public disclosure, and transparency. Visitors who want to visit the city and need or want to stay in a short-term rental aren't going to just disappear. Second, adoption of the ordinances as written is inconsistent with the city's own land use plan, which explicitly requires the preservation of lower-cost visitor accommodations like short-term rentals. By banning a vast swath of STRs, these ordinances make overnight accommodations both rarer and more expensive. So in other words, they turn access to the coast into a luxury for the wealthy rather than something within the reach of regular Californians. We urge a more moderate approach than the sweeping prohibitions in these ordinances. And finally, to wrap up, these ordinances also implicate constitutional issues, in many instances threatening fundamental property and other constitutional rights of the people.
Thank you. You're at time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Steve Fort. Steve Fort, please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Steve Fort. Hey, there is no compelling reason to allow short-term vacation rentals in residential zones where commercial uses and hotels are not allowed, coastal or inland. My wife and I strongly support an enforcement program and prohibition of STRs in single-family and two-unit zones And if they're going to be allowed at all, allow them where they belong in commercial zones and zones that allow hotels. There is no fiscal impact to study. Allow them in zones where commercial uses and hotels are allowed. I also find it curious that taxpayer groups and other organizations that would normally complain about every single fee and tax that's coming down the line are all of a sudden more than eager to have you tax them and take fees from them. So I find that interesting in the position that these folks have found themselves in. We also find it a little stunning that so many people are willing to expose their neighbors to the impacts of short-term rentals. And to some of the comments, these aren't lakefront cottages that are rented out all summer like you might see at a lake. These are in our neighborhoods. These are single-family residential neighborhoods where we're supposed to be living, people that work here and contribute to the community. We think the ordinance is pretty much ready to go. We do think it's absurd to consider reducing on-site parking requirements for the STRs that the city might allow. But in closing, hey, let's not sell out our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are more important than a budget impact. There's no compelling reason to allow short-term vacation rentals in residential zones where commercial uses and hotels are not allowed. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Thomas Woodrow. Thomas Woodrow, please go ahead.
I'm Tom Woodrow. I'm Executive Director of the Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association. We've been advocating for taxpayers for almost 70 years. I testified last week at the same ordinance committee. This last speaker should know that we're concerned about transparency and we are concerned about tax revenue. Truth of it is, the taxes that are paid actually come from outsiders, people who are visiting our community. So that's number one, they're not paid by us. Number two, we continue to advocate for the city council and for this committee before you make a decision that could cost millions of dollars to an already strained budget that could affect services. Right now, I know the city manager has considered cutting the paving budget by 50% and delaying new hires for key departments. And that troubles us. And what we advocate here at the Taxpayers Association is that every decision that the city council makes, every single decision, has to be done responsibly. How would any of us here decide to make a decision that would affect our personal finances, that would cost us extraordinary amount of money without taking in the facts? So send it to the budget committee and at least make that decision in that context. We're not advocating or opposed to short-term rentals, but we do care about the city being able to employ its firefighters, our police, our water, our roads, all the other essential services that are critical. I know there are cities like San Diego that have come up with excellent ordinances that address some of the concerns of these speakers, and while at the same time preserving the rights of people who are in the business of short-term rentals. I think if you asked for a show of hands today, who here in this room has actually stayed at a short-term rental, a VRBO, or Airbnb, I think you'd see almost 100%. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Fong Bui. Fong Bui, please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Fong Bui. Thank you for that. And I speak on behalf of the California Short-Term Rental Association and the local chapter in Santa Barbara. The vast majority of STR hosts here are responsible neighbors, not absentee investors. And CalSTRA supports reasonable regulations, but we think that the overly restrictive rules would actually force local hosts and operators out without delivering affordable housing in return. In the coastal zone, short-term rentals provide lower-cost visitor accommodations for families and middle-income travelers when hotels are limited or unaffordable. And protecting that access is both a legal obligation and an equity issue. Santa Barbara's housing challenges really stem from zoning constraints, construction costs, and slow production. The city has permitted just 11% of its RHNA units, which are now 40% through the cycle. Many affected homes here are valued over $1 million, which aren't affordable housing candidates regardless. And so a straightforward registration system would generate meaningful transient occupancy tax revenue to fund essential services. And in general, DeKalstra urges the city to adopt a balanced approach that protects coastal access, supports responsible local hosts and operators, and align with the realities of the city's own analysis. Thank you so much for your time.
Our next speaker is Michael. Michael, please unmute and go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for your time. I first want to emphasize, and this is a newsflash for a lot of people here, neighborhood protections already exist. There are nuisance laws. They apply to short-term renters, long-term renters, everybody, homeowners including. By the way, housing is privately owned. It's not your housing stock or the community's housing stock. Keep that in mind. There is a fundamental disconnect on capacity and cost. Santa Barbara as a city does not have enough hotel inventory to absorb its demand, and the Coastal Commission understands that. Homestays are not a substitute. Stop acting like they are, be honest, be sincere, because it's going to get head on at the Coastal Commission. They're not the same, completely different use. Secondly, it is absolutely the case that the short-term rentals are a lower cost option. Look at the cost per hotel per night. $550 is the average during the active seasons. STRs, it's $340. It's a savings of $800 to $1,000 a night on the average home per night. So it is a very much solution. The right solution here is to grandfather the existing compliant operators by the city's own framework. They told us this last week. There's 4,000 potential STR operations with this ordinance. Now, we know that's a joke because with all the conditions and rules, it'll end up being. But out of the 4,000, there's only 160 to 200 registered tax-paying operators following the rules. This is obviously a flawed ordinance. Everybody knows. Let's please try to do the right thing, slow down, grandfather compliant operators, and not accelerate things for some political Coastal Commission chair reason. Thank you.
And our final speaker will be Ivana Rosenstein. Ivana, please go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ivana Rosenstein. I'm asking you to reconsider the restriction on short-term rentals for the primary home on properties with an ADU in the coastal zone. I'd like to start with two options for you to consider. First, treat properties where the owner lives in the ADU as hosted stay, allowing short-term rentals in the primary home. Or second, remove the restriction on the primary home altogether. For either option, you can still address concerns about overuse by limiting short-term rentals to one property per owner or capping the number of rental nights annually. These approaches are more effective and fair than license caps, density limits, or lottery systems. These systems tend to lock in existing operators, rarely turn over, and prevent new homeowners from ever participating, creating permanent inequality. In contrast, ownership limits and night caps directly target overuse and speculation while still allowing broad, fair access. My husband and I bought our home in the Mesa specifically to build an ADU as part of our retirement plan. We invested over $1 million and many months of work to design, permit, and build a 3-bedroom ADU with the plan to live in it and rent out the primary house. Only at the very end of the permitting process were we required to sign a covenant preventing short-term rentals for both units. At this point, we had no real choice. If we had known earlier, we would have never moved forward. Since then, both the 2023 ADU ordinance and this proposed ordinance continue to treat properties with ADUs differently by restricting the primary home. This is unusually restrictive discourages homeowners from building ADUs and undermines housing goals. When an owner lives on site in an ADU, renting the main home is effectively a hosted stay with built-in oversight and accountability. I urge you to adopt a more balanced and equitable approach that supports responsible homeowners while addressing community concerns and removing the restriction on the primary home only on properties with ADU. Thank you for your time.
Chair Gutierrez, no further speakers.
Thank you for that. Now I'll open the floor up to my colleagues for comments or questions. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. I think I'm going to start just with comments. Usually we would ask questions first, but I think asking individual line item questions about something that I think fundamentally might need to be reconfigured, I think I'll just make my comments first and then go from there. I do agree this isn't ready, but I also want to say that we're the ordinance committee. We make ordinances. That's what we're here for. So we'll take the time that we need. And I agree it's not ready, but maybe for different reasons than what we've heard. I want to put forward that I really think in the high fire, extreme high fire zones, they need to be banned. To me, it doesn't matter if it happens to also be a coastal zone. The ingress, egress, the safety issues are a real problem. I'll speak for myself, and I've shared this before. I live in the high fire zone. Before they were banned in the high fire zone, there were at least 5 different short-term rentals on my block, but then also on the hillside, the high fire hillside up above. And I can't tell you how many different weekends there were bonfires going on in those hillsides with groups of people, and the sound didn't bother me, the music didn't bother me, the fire bothered me. And there were times when I'd be yelling up from my yard, up to that yard, put the fire out. And yes, I can call the fire department, and yes, they can come. But then if it's your neighbor that you have this interaction with, then you've built a relationship. They know you don't like bonfires up on the high fire hillside, and you have a conversation and you make an agreement. But if it's a short-term rental, the very next weekend, you're doing the exact same thing again. And then the next weekend, the exact same thing again. You don't have that institutional built knowledge of a neighborhood for fire safety. Many of these roads are very tricky for ingress and egress. If you live in a place, you get to know that. If you live in a place, you know that sometimes you have to drive uphill to move away from fire as opposed to downhill because you know the routes, you're familiar with them. We have fire-wise communities where we have, people who are neighbors who live there as primary residents getting together, deciding who are block captains in power outages, PSPSs, like who is going to keep the medication cooled, who has solar panels, who has the ability to keep a neighborhood safe. These are very real things that happen in our community all the time, particularly with the power outages. So if you have renters or short-term renters in high fire hazard areas, each weekend is a new learning process, but also a new, very real risk to the neighborhood. And I just don't think that's right. Once it was banned in the high fire, and almost immediately, those 5 houses are filled with children going to school, walking down the block. They're filled with people who are volunteering in the community, who are looking out for their neighbors. It is an entirely different feel of the neighborhood that we know each other. Now, if I go out of town, I'm not worried that every other house on the block is out of town too. It's not about parking. It's not about collecting TOT. For me, it's not about noise. It's about stability of neighborhoods. It's about knowing our neighbors and keeping people who are residents here in Santa Barbara. I think it's really important. And short-term rentals are preventing long-term residents from taking root. It's just how it is. Our school numbers in our schools are down. That's the canary in the coal mine. We are losing families. We're losing people who can afford to live here. So this isn't for me, an idea of how can we make revenue, oh, here's this TOT, let's maximize that, or what are we going to do without it? This is something that's been unregulated and has been going on for a long time and has reached such a level that what we're hearing from neighborhoods, what we're hearing in risk, has reached a level we can't ignore. This is impacting residents who are here, and it's preventing residents from staying here. This doesn't prevent tourism if we move forward with banning them. We have so many hotels. They're at 60% capacity. We have boutique hotels. We have large hotels. We have beachfront hotels. I think they can take care of the affordable accommodations along in the coastal zone. They're required to. We're required to have so many affordable accommodations in the coastal zone. As to home shares, there's no way they're a replacement for going to, a private home that should be a residence of people living in the community and experiencing a town as if you live there, but you don't. It's a lovely experience staying in a short-term rental. I've done it myself. It's very enjoyable because you get the feeling and you're getting the benefit of all the other neighbors who are investing in their property, who are keeping things up, who are making that nice. And it feels really special because you're borrowing somebody else's time in what could be a home. Not saying that's not a great way to vacation, but it's not a great way to keep neighborhoods together. I'll add to that, it is extremely challenging to build housing. We hear that all the time. It's so expensive. There's so many challenges. There's so many people looking for housing. Hotels don't have that same burden. A lot of times it's more attractive and easier for a developer to build a hotel because they don't have the same burdens of housing. We need to fix that. This is not a solution to that. This is part of the problem. Let hotels be hotels. Let housing be housing. It's too hard to produce the housing to let it so easily be repurposed in this way. So again, it's not for me about TOT. It's not for looking for ways to make revenue. It's really about not selling out our neighborhoods. Sure, we would all love TOT. We know our budget needs it. We're looking for other ways, but this isn't the way to do it. I'd like to see them banned everywhere they can be, the strictest possible. As to the Coastal Commission, there's been a lot of sort of chatter about it. I'm not aware of any rush or not rush to get this to the Coastal Commission or not. I think we need to make the best ordinance we believe in and let the Coastal Commission do their job and do what they will with it. And if they send it back, they send it back. If it passes through, it passes through. But I'm personally not tailoring this to something that I'm guessing the Coastal Commission might or might not do. So I think in the idea of keeping things for stability, I am in favor of primary residences only. I think there could be a cap at 90 days if it's your primary residence. I don't have a problem with allowing home share. It's not for everyone. Not everybody's going to choose it. It's certainly not a replacement for the experience of borrowing a home and feeling like you live in a neighborhood. But it's definitely an option, and people do it. It allows people to age in place. That's really important. The goal is stability for our residents who live here to be able to stay here in their primary residence. Then I'm okay with them renting it out 90 days max. I'm okay with home share. Again, for me, the bottom line is residents, and it's not TOT as the bottom line.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon. Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to reverse that. I won't have comments, but I agree with most of what you said. So particularly the erosion of single-family neighborhoods. I have some questions, as anticipated. It's kind of my global question to pose to staff, and I think I share a comment I just heard too, that regardless of how little or much time we have today, I'm not really comfortable with passing this along as it is. I want another shot at it. And kind of my global shot at this with staff is, I believe there's a place for these. There's a place, we have a place for, in the city, in both the coastal zone and outside the coastal zone, for hotels. And I think these are kind of like hotels. I think the impacts already exist in those neighborhoods, even if there's, say, West Beach, there's single-family homes or multifamily homes down there, or in other places up through the State Street corridor or the Milpas corridor or Upper State Street. And I just, I hearken back to at least what I heard last August or whenever, and that was that there would be a viable, credible pathway to short-term vacation rentals existing in those allowed areas. And I don't think I would have ever been conversant enough any time in my life to go through this line by line and try and figure out where the on-the-ground barriers are, other than the ones that jump right up and slap me in the face, like you can't nose in and back out of a driveway, or you have to have X number of parking spaces, and what happens to somebody who already lives on a street with no parking spaces off the street, which exists in many of our older parcel areas in town. And so I'm still concerned, I think rightly so, given the way this has arrived here. I think that was said, and then, there was a CUP mentioned, and then the back out driving and all that kind of stuff. I'm still concerned that there are places in this that I don't know the right questions to ask to get to the point where my interpretation is a clear and viable pathway is the same as staff's clear and viable pathway. So what would be holding me back from moving this along today would be to challenge staff to go back and look at this line by line and tell us where those blockages may be that I'm not conversant in enough to ask. One of the things I see is sometimes in a paragraph or a chapter, we start off by mentioning the residential connection, but then we say later on has to comply with all city zoning and ordinance regulations. And I want to scream and go, does that mean all residential city zoning and organizations, or does that mean all commercial city zoning And so the devil's in the details on those, and you may even have the same intent when you wrote this as I have, but I don't know that that's the way it reads to everybody who would then apply it once we start implementing. Does that make sense? I see everybody nodding. So, so that's kind of my global why, not quite ready, would like to put some work back on you guys to really go through this and look at it from that perception. And if we need to have another discussion or argument about what the right perception is, clear and viable pathway, happy to do that too with this group or up at council. So then that's kind of my overall worry. And then I had mentioned once before, Teva, this idea of if somebody's actually out there right now operating a short-term vacation rental and are not compliant with the TOT requirements, this would be, doesn't really matter. I guess it matters both, but my focus is kind of on the coastal zone, because I think the Cracky decision opened up this chasm of a door that everybody could just walk through with and not have to do anything. And so, and if somebody has done that, and then also not, you'd have to be living in a dark cave somewhere separate from all of society, and so has not signed up to pay TOT, why would we allow them a viable pathway to come into compliance when they've already been disregarding that in the past? And for those of you who are focusing on dollar revenue out there, this should resonate with you. And so could we not backdate to say, just pick a date, January 1st of this year, and say in the coastal zone, because we don't have permits, So the people that need to get a permit or that would be pursuing a permit, that are operating and would pursue a permit in the coastal zone, would be those who have currently been paying TOT as of January 1st. And if you've been operating in the coastal zone and you need to pursue a permit, but you haven't been paying TOT, then you're just not eligible to pursue a permit or a license, whatever we're calling it. Is that not legally allowed? And I just, in my mind, I draw a nexus from, adopt a rent freeze or move to an RSO, and we do that in January or February, but we pick a date back in December when we first start talking about this.
Councilmember Jordan, through the chair, I think we could craft something that would be similar. I want to look at it a little more narrowly. I don't know how far back we would want to go. But yes, it's a policy direction that we could do. As I mentioned before, it also, even if they weren't paying TOTs and they came in and wanted to get the permit, we would still go back and collect.
For some of us, including you who have been around here for a while, it's like what I'm trying to avoid is a line on Garden Street for like Measure E. When people knew we were going to pass Measure E and they lined up to get their applications in before that square footage was used up, right? And in this particular case, I just don't think there's a reward for bad behavior in that regard. Okay. I want to come back to this question again on somebody owning more than one short-term vacation rental, and why if we adopt something and they're compliant with something and either currently have them down in the in the coastal zone that we do or don't know about, but they've been paying TOT. And then why we would penalize somebody who owned more than one if they're doing everything we wanted to do and doing it in a zone we wanted to, and they in the 6 months after adoption they meet the requirements of a permit. Why we would just generically say you can't have more than one. I guess my big picture feeling is that I have no problem with growth of numbers down in allowable zones. Just like if somebody wants to build a hotel, they can go build a hotel. If somebody wants to build a restaurant in an allowable zone there too, why would I be saying one person can't own 2 restaurants or 3 restaurants? So can you help me with that? And is that what the reasoning is behind that, and what else I can do to make a case to talk about removing that?
Through the chair, committee member Jordan. So I feel like that's really a policy choice of your committee. We originally went with one. It was pretty common in other STR ordinances we looked at. When we started crafting this ordinance, we saw what other people were doing. But it's really a policy choice.
Okay, fair enough. I'll keep that on my list then. And then we talked last week about the requirements of getting a license, and one of the requirements to submit your application was that you have also obtained a business license. And my question was at that time, why would you have to go purchase a business license before you even knew if your application was approved? And I think somebody had a response there. We'll manipulate that to not be a requirement of the application. Does that sound right?
Maybe.
It'd be a condition.
I'm sorry,
It'd be a
through the
condition
chair.
of an approved application, but not a requirement that you're submitting proof that you've purchased a business license with your application materials. It's like the carts before the horse there.
Well, our feedback from the finance department was that the business licenses are fairly low entry. They're actually inexpensive. I mean, you can do it for a home accountant, you can do it for a daycare business. So to invest whatever it is, $80 to $100 to get the business tax certificate as part of your short-term rental license. That didn't seem like a giant barrier. If you wanted to, we can work it out in the way the permitting is going to happen online and say before you're approved to get a permit issued, before we issue it, show us evidence of these two things. So it's the
Okay.
business tax certificate as well as the separated certificate to pay the TOT.
And do you anticipate that a business license for this type of operation would stay the same as it is now? Isn't that the business license our method of recouping full cost recovery for administration of the program, pre-inspections, appeals, that kind of thing?
Actually, the community development would have additional, it would be great if Lindsay would explain that. Go ahead.
Hi, through the chair. Good to talk to you. So the business tax certificate process would not be changed because per municipal code, we have the process for business taxes. The applicant would go through our normal process, preferably online, fill out the form, say that they're estimating what their gross receipts will be for their upcoming year for their short-term rental, and the calculation is made based on their gross receipt estimate, and they would pay in that way.
Okay, then we have another vehicle to collect, and that's through the application process?
Correct.
And is the collection of that money after the application is approved?
It would be part of the application review process before it's
Yeah,
issued.
so help me with that. So as a customer, I want to put my application in, and I don't know if it's going to be approved, and there's some of that application that, just like you're doing a home project, there's some of that application that is internal work that happens before the application was approved, but there's a burden of cost to the operation of short-term vacation rentals that also would take place after your short-term vacation rental is there. Specific to that one, you would have complaint management, right? And periodic inspections or whatever. And so, again, why would we prepay for that as a whole, not knowing if your application is going to be approved or declined? And it's just, I don't get the nexus to, and it's an expense we should be collecting then for future, it's an amount of money we should be collecting for future city expense before the application is even approved.
Through the chair, Councilman Jordan, I want Ms. Belts to answer that, but recall, if you will, that if you come in and you want to do a lot split or you want to do a condo conversion, you pay fees up front to have your application reviewed. So that's consistent with the policy already. And then Ms. Belts has actually worked with Building and Safety about what it would take to actually review the application. So that's.
I'm not sure it's an apples to apples because on a lot split, you're paying for the work that's being done before the lot is split. Here you're asking me to pay for compliance costs that aren't happening unless I'm getting an approved application, right?
Not exactly. Go ahead.
The cost of the program just to manage complaints, how is that being recovered? And is it only being recovered by people whose applications are approved, or is it also being financed by people who aren't having their applications approved?
Councilmember Jordan, we're still working out all the details of the fees, and I don't think we've released the final fee amounts yet. There will be a separate fee just for processing the license, which is just the full cost recovery of staff time to review the application materials, do a site inspection, send out the mailed notice, those kinds of solid fees that just apply directly to that license. The other fee you're referring to, which is ongoing compliance, that's a separate fee, and we haven't quite released all those amounts yet.
All right.
Yeah.
Makes sense though, right?
Through the chair, Ellen Kokenda, City Planner, to Committee Member Jordan. I think the setup of this is we want people to be successful if they're going to apply for something and take the time. So generally, our planning counter, anytime we have a new ordinance or something that we're advising people, we want to kind of walk through we encourage them they could submit a pre-application or just come into the counter and talk to us and say, are you in an area that you're allowed to operate in? Are you, do you meet these criteria? And the way that we're working on the back end to even set up a short-term rental permitting process through our existing software program is to have the applicants go through the criteria of, do you meet this criteria? Do you meet this standard? And so it's kind of asking those questions up front, and if they don't, then that should tell them, like, you don't really, this doesn't work for you. This is not gonna do that. So
Okay.
having the business license is one of the criteria, and that's pretty standard practice. And so I think that just to kind of the educational piece, the walking through, and then we also, sometimes we get people applying for things and they're way off or it doesn't work out, and then we do refund fees. Maybe staff spend a portion of time reviewing something so they don't get 100% return, but we say, okay, if it's dead on arrival, and we're not gonna just keep the fees if staff haven't done the work to do that. So there is a refund process.
Okay.
So just for clarity.
One of my goals in this is not to look up a year after we've implemented and have staff start telling us that we haven't been collecting enough money. So I want to make sure that we're over-collecting almost up front, but I don't think part of that burden should be on people who are getting denied their application. They're not walking away with a piece of paper eventually. There's a lot of places, and I'll just give you one example. Well, maybe I won't, but there's a lot of places in here I see different uses of the phrase owner, host, and property manager. And then I see other places where it's just property manager or host. And then I see other places where it's just property manager. And I think you could probably, I don't imagine, and I've asked this before, the ultimate responsible party is the owner of the property, right? So I think there's some places like that where you're clear, if you're designating who is responsible or who needs to be doing something or who's being noticed or who the complaint is being given to, I think you need always the phrase owner in there too, regardless of who the other phrases are. There may be a property manager. The property manager may be the owner. There may be a host. There may be a property manager who's not the owner. And I think we need to be really, really careful in making sure that compliance processes that go forward are clearly notifying the owner along with anybody else the owner would like available. Like, I think there's a phrase in there in one section that the property manager must respond in a certain amount of time. Well, that'd be good too, but the owner's really the person to respond in a certain amount of time, and I don't think you can go wrong by putting owner in that string of words for any one of those locations. I think I'm strolling into a comment there. Just want to keep on your list this one-night minimum thing. I get the one-night minimum. We don't want hourly, but I think, again, the opportunity to come in and cause a ruckus on one night, and by the time they're gone at 11 the next day, you've barely had time for a complaint. The owner hasn't had time to respond to a complaint. A successful short-term use in a tourist town shouldn't have a problem with a two-night minimum. I mean, that's kind of my overall view from everybody who thinks this is a tourist town. So I'd like to keep that on your list of potential changes. There's a section on noise that starts off with the Santa Barbara Municipal Code noise requirements, and then follows that up a couple bullets later that says outdoor amplified music or sound is prohibited. And I find those contradictory because the noise ordinance, as far as I know, does not prohibit outdoor amplified music or sound. it prohibits it above a certain level. So do both of those belong in the same section? Is there not a level of amplified noise in a neighborhood that is acceptable during the non-quiet hours? What was the thought there? If you're looking for that, it's, you know where it is, okay.
Yeah, through the chair and Councilmember Jordan. We'll need to look at that and look at the two sections, make sure they're not contradictory, and we can amend that as needed.
As usual, I could make an argument for either. So
Yeah.
I'm just staking out a point where I see, it's just kind of weird that both of those are sitting in there.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Okay. Tava, I want to ask about the insurance thing again. So it's still a week later. This is still kind of festering to me. So I build a hotel. As part of the whatever at the end of the hotel, I have to indemnify the city for any legal action taken as a result of the approval of that project. Is that Mike's simple way of explaining that? Right? I don't have to indemnify and hold harmless the city for the operation of the hotel after it's approved and out there working, correct?
Yes, the way our indemnification language works is it's strictly as to the project approvals.
Right. So what would rise to the level that we need to treat a short-term vacation rental as if it's a project that's operating on city property leading to a liability, potential liability to the city, when in fact it's, depending upon where we're falling on our commercial residential thing, it is a commercial or residential exposure on private property.
Councilmember Jordan, that's a policy call.
Okay.
I do believe that the indemnification language is good, but whether or not you want to back it with insurance, that's a policy decision.
And would it not be reasonable to include some type of language on, because somebody's remedy that disagreed with an approval of a license would be to sue the property owner and sue the city at the same time, right?
Yes.
And so like my example of a real project, a hotel, would it be appropriate to put language in there directly pointing to that, you know, the results of this decision, if litigated, are at the burden of the person that was given the approval of the project, right?
Yes, and that's what the indemnification language is intended to do.
So that's what that means?
Right.
Okay.
And the reason I think the indemnification language is important because we do home inspections as part of this program just to make sure that the home is, you know, up to par.
Okay.
And so, you know, if someone were to fall in a pool and hurt themselves, and the city would generally be most likely because the Deep Pockets is named as an additional party.
There's a section under the platform compliance requirements that say that the platforms would be collecting TOT on our behalf and remitting it to the city monthly. And has anybody asked the platforms if that's what they do now with their clients, and what their structure is on setting it up? I mean, so that would be just a normal part of their business process in other cities where they actually pay monthly, or are they a month later, or are they 2 months later, or what do they do?
I'm not sure of the exact number of days of transmitted, but they're happy to do that, and we have already explained to them they're going to have to put the license number, our license number on their site. So that's actually a standard way of doing it for a lot of agencies.
Okay. That's kind of, I have more comments on stuff too, but I'll hang on to those and see if we want to talk about those today. Just some general comments. I agree 100% with Councilmember Sneddon that this is not about finances. This is not about whatever else it's about. This is about an erosion of single-family residential zoning where people have a historical and current expectation of what that's going to look like. So if you live on a block, just use my own example. I live on a block, there's 5 or 6 houses on each side of the block. I should have a reasonable explanation that there won't be a liquor store somewhere on that block too, or a laundromat, and a short-term vacation rental. There is nothing in the zoning code historically in the city for 100 years that indicates any semblance of a commercial operation like a short-term vacation rental in a single-family neighborhood zone. And I think if you wanted to listen to us based on our life experiences, you know, grandparents, parents, me, kids, grandkids, my example, we could talk about what that looks like to us, a single-family residential zone, and your neighbors, and who's in your neighborhood, and who's present, who's there, who you know needs help, who you know doesn't need help, who you can rely on for what. I've been in my neighborhood long enough to see the wave go from a lot of kids to 0 kids, and now I'm seeing that wave come back again, despite that, you know, what was originally in 1956 a $12,000 house, it would probably just be obscene, but I see them all the time, 1956 houses get knocked down and a lot bought for $2 million and knock down the house and build a $3 million house. There's still kids moving into the neighborhood in those type of houses. And these are what should be happening in our neighborhoods. The idea, I read one email that said these are anecdotal stories of what goes on with short-term vacation rentals, and I can assure you, I have seen email strings of no responses from property managers or owners. I have seen videos of large parties at 11 o'clock at night with live bands and taco trucks on the street in places. I have seen examples of some blocks with 20 houses where half of them are short-term vacation rentals, and these are not what people were assured when they moved or bought in that residence, and regardless of whether it's a tourist town. We have a tourist town, but we have zones for those tourist commercial developments, and they are not single-family residential zones. Some of the other comments, that this has been a sudden, rushed, and non-transparent process. So, and I know I'm missing information here. In 2026, we're now on our 2nd ordinance committee meeting. We'll probably have a 3rd. We've had 1 planning commission meeting on this subject, public meeting. In 2025, we had 2 city council meetings on this topic. And in 2024, which predates this management of the Community Development Department, we had 1 city council meeting. So we are into almost our 3rd year of discussion of this situation, and it has been public meetings, extensive local media reporting, and many of you on both sides of the aisle are in this audience today because I personally sent out 1,800 emails a week ago Sunday, inviting all of you, okay, on both sides of the aisle. So I think to say that this has not been a very public process and has been rushed is rather disingenuous. The only reason we're here, other than protecting single-family residential neighborhoods in the coastal zone, is because of a procedural legal decision, known as the Cracky decision, that disallowed the city's action to take earlier remedies with this. It was not a legal decision that said the city could not regulate short-term vacation rentals inside or outside the coastal zone. It was the method and the procedure that the city used to adopt a prior ordinance that was found to be incorrect. We're doing the correct method now to remedy that. But we certainly have that within our ability and right to put something in place legally. The Cracky decision has no role in that. The comment that this is a problem with revenues for the city, particularly at this time, well, I'll just tell you, I will never continue or adopt a bad policy that focuses on a revenue situation. What exists right now is bad policy, and it needs to be corrected. We will figure out a way to remedy that in the budget. It's not a huge insurmountable number, and just flippantly, I'm sorry, but if we were interested in revenues, we'd be building a liquor store or a laundromat next to your house in single-family neighborhoods, and that is not something we do. I probably, out of everybody sitting here, probably of everybody sitting at council, have had the most exposure over the last 20 years to hotel and tourism policy in this city. And I would tell you, I don't expect anything to transition from short-term vacation rental use to hotel occupancy. It is a different customer. This, again, is not about whether we have the capacity for hotels, whether we're going to hurt hotels, whether we're going to benefit hotels. That, again, is not my concern. My concern is the conflict in single-family neighborhood zones and what that's eroding over the long term. And I think some of you who know me would recognize that I frequently walk down the middle of most policy decisions rather than get on one side or the other. And I would love to be in a position to do this with this. If you said 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, but 5 years ago, I think we would have been able to start to have a conversation and pursue a more reasonable, maybe, opportunity to look at limited placement in zones across the city with a cap, geographically separated, whatever that looked like. The world in the last certainly the world in the last 5 years has just gone out of control with short-term vacation rentals and their impacts in the neighborhood. We are in a different place than other places people are referencing for why can't you do it like Ventura, or why can't you do it like Del Mar, or wherever it is. We're already past the point, I feel, of no return, and maybe in the future sometime you can come back and readdress that. I don't think anybody sitting up here or at a full council would be inflexible in that way, but the way to remedy it right now is to stop the bleeding. That's all the comments I have, so happy to keep participating as long as we want to today in the details.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. I do have a question for staff. One of the commenters brought up whether or not people want to stay in the house of somebody who potentially is a danger. My question is, are convicted felons allowed to use their property as STRs regardless if they're on the property or not? Or because as far as I know, there's no regulation against a convicted felon renting out their home to somebody, right?
Chair Gutierrez, that's not written into the ordinance, so I believe technically they probably could.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that was the only question I had. I appreciate everyone coming out and voicing their opinions about this situation and my colleagues' thoughts and comments on it. I I do have a little bit of reservation considering the historical context of Santa Barbara being a tourist city and this being a part of that industry. I can't ignore that fact of our city's history, and I do have a sense of this don't bite the hand that feeds you type of situation, considering that this is majority of a tourist generating economy that we live in. But the interesting thing that I'll agree with my colleagues is that we all took an oath up here to protect the people of this community, and it doesn't say anything about tourists. So in order to uphold my oath, I will continue doing that. So right now, I will open up the floor to any proposed motions from my colleagues. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. So 100% agree with Councilmember Jordan. And I think it can come back to us with some suggested changes, or I'm not sure, I'm not prepared to decide how, or put forward how to decide to move it forward. But my bottom line is only in the allowable zones where hotels are already zoned. And the rest of that can all, you know, the business licenses, all of that, those are internal processes of how that could work. We haven't seen the fee schedule yet. But I think as long as we are keeping it only where hotels are allowed, and then I would be okay with home share and primary residence up to 90 days. There are a lot of teachers, there are a lot of people with seasonal work who are able to stay in their primary residence because they vacate for 3 months in the summer and rent it out, but that would be a long-term rental anyway. But I would be okay with those two additions. But really, that's as far as personally I would like to go.
Councilmember, sorry,
Go ahead.
can I interrupt? I wanted a clarification on what you just said, because it touched on a couple of things. You said you were okay with home shares. Did you mean as currently proposed, where they're allowed in residential zones in the coastal zone, but not inland?
Yes, and let me clarify, the extreme high fire and high fire hazard areas continue to be an issue anywhere. But home shares, I'm open to exploring that in all zones.
In all
Because-
zones, okay.
Yes, and
And
just-
then the 90-day, though, you're saying would be with nobody present. So that's a whole different thing.
That is a whole
That's a
different thing.
short-term rental.
Thank you for clarifying that, because if it's 90 days, that's a long-term rental, and it wouldn't be
Or you mean 90 days in a calendar year? Yeah. but-
90 days consecutive.
Oh, consecutive.
Up
That's a
to-
long-term rental.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so we're still allowing.
That's allowed.
That's allowed. So thank you for clarifying on that. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Or
Were
not
any
yet?
other-
I mean, I think if a host is present as a home share, then many of the safety issues are mitigated, but I'm also would be fine with banning them everywhere except for hotel zones.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
So
Councilmember
do you
Jordan.
want a motion or just to send you away with comments?
Well, I guess the question is, do you want to return? So a couple things. I would say return with more information. I'm hearing some information requests and some potential changes. I think Councilmember Jordan had a series of questions about how, basically looking at the allowances in the coastal zone, making sure that we're making it as easy as possible, and just making sure that the ordinance language allows for that in the coastal zone, which I'm hearing some consistency. Allow them where they're allowed in the hotel zones, in the hotel zones, yes. So bringing back that analysis, just making sure that what we are in fact requiring of them. And then home shares throughout the city, but not in the high fire or severe fire hazard zones. And then I think what I would suggest is if you would like to just have it come back to ordinance committee, that you close public comment and have the information come back to ordinance committee. And we can provide some of the follow-up information that you guys have all requested. And at that point, make a decision about whether to move it forward or make more changes to the ordinance.
So I think you got everything I was worried about there, but so a couple suggestions. So I'm really interested in staff as the subject matter experts, really drawing a nexus between a viable pathway where we say we'll like them versus, okay, what's in the actual language here that Mike Jordan doesn't know to ask the right question about that would be a challenge. And you don't have to say, you don't have to come back and say, okay, we're just getting rid of that because you said so, but come back and make an argument if we really need to leave that in there. You know, similar to the discussion we've had on back out driving, and I think we've resolved that. But there may be others that can't be resolved. There's two, for the home shares, there's don't carry my fire map around with me. I should for the Mesa, but there's two different types of zones down there. So one is the Allen Road area. I think that and the Flora Vista Hill behind Elings, I think they have slightly different names on them. I'm not really sure.
It's
the
coastal high fire hazard.
Is that there? Okay. So just bring a fire map when you come back. And then and just take a shot at the strikeout revision of the ordinance and come back. And then I guess the only other thing I would ask is nothing else on the menu, a couple hours of clear time, and if we had to wait 3 weeks or a month for that, okay. Because I just, today's really pressed and there's devil's in the details, and I just think we really need to spend some time on this and work on it, okay?
So we heard, I don't know that unless the city attorney says we need to make a motion to close the public comment period and then we can do some red lines based on the feedback and bring that back for ordinance committee.
To the committee, we can close public comment period, but then we have to continue it to a date certain. It has to be a continuance. Otherwise, we need to open public comment back up again. And if we
look at the
continue it to a date certain, we won't need to renotice it as well.
I was gonna say that I'm hesitant to close public comment if we're gonna actually apply changes, that we need to allow the public to be able to comment on those.
That's fine. I'm just asking what the committee's preference is. That's fine. We can.
It wouldn't bother me personally if it was a single item and it started as early as 10:30. So if it took 2-3 hours, we still have the chance to catch our breath before 2 o'clock.
We can.
And so if everybody can nod to that, it seems like that would be a great idea. Okay.
And we will.
And then that way we could include public comment.
Yeah, so that way I don't think we need a formal motion. I think we've gotten direction to bring back red lines of the ordinance and also in all the zones to make it as easy as possible to do short-term rentals in the zones where they are allowed. Identify what those changes are and the points that staff or the committee members might not realize, and then home shares in all zones minus the high fire hazard and the coastal high fire hazard zones. And we will bring that back and we'll find another date for ordinance.
So this is going to be a continuation?
Not a technical continuation, we'll renotice it, but
Gotcha.
we're not, the committee wouldn't take any action today.
Okay. All right. Well, unless there's anything else from my colleagues or staff, then I'd like to thank everybody again for being here, and we'll look. Oh, yeah, that's right. My bad. A little eager to take a break here. So we'll close this item, and we'll have the next item read to us, Ms. Clerk.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. Our next item will be the proposed amendment to the ordinance restricting parking of oversized vehicles. Just want to make an announcement for those who are watching online. If you have your hand raised, that would be for the next item. The last item has been closed and no further public comment for this meeting. Thank you.
All right. Miss Anderson, when you're ready, feel free.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Ordinance Committee. I'm actually going to hand it over to City Attorney John Doimus to start us off this afternoon.
Thank you, Barbara, and afternoon committee. I know you've already had a long item, so this one hopefully will not take as long. It is a very short, brief amendment we are doing this on this ordinance. I'll explain it. So the recommendation we as staff are asking for is to make an amendment to our oversized vehicle ordinance, which I'll discuss briefly, and to direct staff to continue to working with New Beginnings on providing resources to individuals living in oversized vehicles. Next slide, please. So the crux of this whole ask in this presentation is to make one amendment, one change in the ordinance, and that is to remove the current requirement that allows for continuous, endless, repeated notices when oversized vehicles parking on street. So this is only on street, not private spaces, and to allow them to move 1,000 feet to avoid a citation. And instead, just establish a single warning system before enforcement begins. And it's really important because the original ordinance that was developed in 2017 never contained this provision of moving 1,000 feet and giving multiple warnings. And I'll explain why. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the original oversized vehicle ordinance was amended and adopted in 2017, and it was there to address basically strictly to safety issues caused by oversized vehicles. It does not matter the vehicle. It could apply to a Mercedes Sprinter vehicle, it could apply to an RV, a semi-truck, you name it. And the reason for it is we have obviously an older city, narrow streets, et cetera, so it causes issues from traffic in terms of navigating that, blocking views to turns, et cetera. So we have a strict definition, not to the specific type of vehicle or model or make, but just as to the dimensions you see up there. Next slide, please. So we have had several challenges over the year, almost expanding 2 decades on oversized or similar type vehicle ordinances we had. We had one on RV parking, we've had on oversized vehicles, and the issue here is that in 2017, we amended the ordinance and we had faced a legal challenge. And at the time, part of the settlement was to maybe add this section in, where we allow a multiple warning system, allowing 1,000 feet to move as part of that amendment. Next slide, please. So what happened was, as part of this amendment, we've encountered consequences which Ms. Anderson will go over in the stats, which are very important and very important to establish in the record, that in over the 3 years we've had that, it's created issues in terms of oversized vehicles basically congregating in areas, causing issues, and refusing to heed the warnings, that they just move, but they're still on the street and barely move. And it's had significant health and safety impacts. And I think what's important to note is that when we agreed to this agreement and we agreed to try this out, a long period of length of time has gone and lapsed since there. It's not 6 months, 1 year. We're talking 3 years since there. And we have significant stats to show the impacts, the health and safety impacts on that. Now, one argument I want to make the Commission aware as well, a simple question would be, we entered a settlement agreement, and we agreed to add this in the ordinance. So how can the city take that back? And I'm sure if we were challenged, it's a fair point to make that people would say, oh, you're not operating in good faith or in breach of that. My answer to that is, first, there's many legal cases that say that the cities do not waive their police powers or ability to address health and safety issues. If we did, that would create absurd results. We can't do that. And second of all, I think we operated in good faith in this. Like I said, we waited a 3-year period of time, and we've looked and seen the situations. And the opposite end is that this has created a loophole where it really has defeated the purpose of the ordinance and caused health and safety impacts. And we're trying to address that in the most humane possible way as possible, while we're trying to balance the need for the community as well as the need for those residing in this vehicle who usually are the ones where we're having to address this issue. Also, the legal landscape has changed. The U.S. Supreme Court I have up there in Grants Pass versus Johnson held that, the city may enforce criminal, nuisance issues, right? They recognize in that case that cities do face challenges in addressing regulating public safety, and they do retain the ability to address public safety concerns. And so this ordinance, this amendment is a response to getting those stats, seeing the impact of the last 3 years, and trying to address it. We still have a warning system. We still are going to focus hard, and Ms. Anderson will talk more about it, in terms of getting people enrolled into housing or addressing the issue. And that's the one end of the balance. The other balance is not letting there be issues where you have a series of oversized vehicles causing health and safety concerns by congregating, blocking streets, causing of dumping, environmental concerns. Next slide, please. So Ms. Anderson will go into the public safety impacts.
So although the oversized vehicle ordinance does not always have correlations to people experiencing homelessness, the city is seeing the number of people residing in their vehicles increasing year over year. During last year's point in time count, the number was estimated to be 381 people. The public safety, health, and environmental impacts that we're experiencing due to vehicles being located and remaining in one area is very significant. In the staff report, we included data from a 6-month period that started in August and went through January, which included 75 enforcement contacts and reports of 40 unique vehicles identified. This afternoon, we included data since that time through April 1st, and the numbers have grown. So just in over a 2-month period, 108 oversized vehicle reports or enforcement contacts were made with 38 unique vehicles. Several vehicles appeared repeatedly, including 10 vehicles that were recorded at least 4 times and 1 recorded 12 times. This is demonstrating repeated relocation rather than compliance. We also have data from our code enforcement team that addresses the public health and environmental impacts of individuals residing in their vehicles. This includes illegal dumping and abandoned property removal. As you can see, in just over a 2-month period, there were 551 such reports citywide, but 35% of those reports occurred along Quarantina, which is one of our areas that is highly impacted by oversized vehicles. Having said that, in this period of time over the last 2 years now, we have been the fortunate recipient of a California Encampment Resolution Fund grant in partnership with the County of Santa Barbara. And so we received over $2 million in resources and partnered with New Beginnings to be able to specifically outreach to individuals residing in their vehicles citywide. There has been a huge success around this program, and 118 individuals, equating to 79 vehicles, have been enrolled in that program, of which 71 individuals have already been housed, including 36 placements in interim housing and shelter. And so what we're finding is that the folks that have been receptive and have been engaged are enrolled and on the pathway to housing or have been housed in that period of time. And the individuals that remain have a level of resistance and want to remain in their vehicles given the comfort that it allows them. So we're really trying to work hand in hand at advancing this proposed update to our ordinance while we still have ongoing resources to be able to accept folks in the program and be able to get them on that pathway to housing.
And as we've said with the recommendation of staff, I just want to highlight one final point based on the information Ms. Anderson provided. As I started in the onset of my presentation, this ordinance applies to all vehicles, regardless of economic, socioeconomic status, type of vehicle. It's regulated basically on size. The reason why we have put this information in there regarding in terms of people, dwelling in vehicles was the issue was brought forth in the original amendment that was changed was brought forth in a lawsuit. And it was of that lawsuit, the causes of actions we're talking about representing homeless individuals living in their vehicles. And we agreed to put this amendment in there to potentially address that issue as a way, hopefully, like I said, to get help and services, to give chances to comply and seek housing, because the streets aren't made and designed for people to be living in, and regardless of the size of the vehicle, and the law should apply equally across the board. But that amendment at the time was put in there to hope that it would be a step for people to seek permanent housing, the city to assist in. But what has happened over a 3-year period, as I mentioned, is that has gone from a situation now that has created and presented health and safety concerns. So that is the only reason why we are mentioning these stats, because the original amendment was based on a lawsuit regarding these allegations. And now the request for the committee before you is based on repealing that amendment and just having a single warning system because of the consequences of it after 3 years and us being able to look back and see the results. And that's my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now I'll open it up to my colleagues. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you. And this is just for questions at this point, or do we have public? Okay.
We have no public comment online, but thank you for asking.
Do we have enough availability in the safe parking program to accommodate all the vehicles that we're counting?
So Chair Gutierrez and Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, we do not have the number of available spaces to accommodate everyone who's residing in their vehicles in the city of Santa Barbara. What's been so great about the program with the encampment resolution funding is that we're able to case manage and house and work on housing navigation with folks to have and facilitate that pathway right from living in their vehicles directly into housing. So if there is an available space, that's accommodated in other cities, and we are still working to advocate for additional spaces in the city of Santa Barbara. So that is always something we're working with businesses on, nonprofit organizations, our city lots and city buildings, but we are still working to make sure that those folks are enrolled and on their pathway outside of that.
Which is amazing. Thank you. I mean, I think obviously that's the best route is to have people be housed. My concern is, I think from a legal standpoint, or maybe just ethical, where are the vehicles supposed to go?
Sure. Chair Gutierrez, Committee Member Sneddon, that's a good question. Obviously, we have the new beginnings and all that, but there's an influx. I think that question from a legal standpoint, ethically is separate, and ethically is something I think is up to each individual council member to decide in terms of how they feel. Legally, I think it would have been much more of an issue if we had the Boise decision, because the Boise decision years ago, about 5-6 years ago, talked about if you did not have a number of available beds, et cetera, that would preclude enforcement. And I guess you can draw an analogy to that, to maybe these issues. I think they're a little bit different, but I think it's a fair analogy. That case was overturned and then Grant passed. So from at least a legal perspective, the city does not at least have to identify or concern itself with the issue in terms of the availability of spaces. I think obviously we can work and strive on that. I also, and this is just without any fact-based evidence behind me, I don't know the effects of the change of our ordinance had, if that caused even more vehicle dwellers to be in there, because a lot of other surrounding cities have such kind of similar ordinances, and we don't. So now knowing that someone can just keep moving around without facing any citations, I don't know if that added to an influx or not. We can look at that issue, but legally, I don't think we need to look at the availability on that issue. But I understand your other follow-up question, which I leave to each member to decide.
Okay, thank you. Well, and I guess the concern that I have is that so many people, I mean, as we know from New Beginnings, have, they're in school or they have a job and they're otherwise from Santa Barbara, live in Santa Barbara, work in Santa Barbara, and the first place people go is to their cars. And I think when that happens, a lot of times people don't even know where to park or what to do or how to manage that situation. So with citations on top of that, that can make the difference between being able to handle it or not. So I'm a little concerned about that. I mean, clearly with the photographs that we have here, we don't want, a buildup of a vehicle that never moves and has things stacked up against it and it's creating a hazard. But I guess I have just genuine concerns about if, other than striving, is there a place that we can designate as, maybe it's not part of the whole safe parking program, but where it's legal to park your vehicle overnight with you in it?
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, first, this ordinance only pertains to oversized vehicles. So we want to be clear about that distinction of the number of people we have residing in vehicles of any size. The second piece is that we are actively working to engage every individual that is receptive to be enrolled in the program and get the support they need on the pathway to housing. So of the individuals that have been enrolled in the program, 45 of those are employed. Another 42 are experiencing disabilities, right? So something that impacts their ability to actually bring in income that would help sustain their housing opportunity. The individuals that we are seeing and experiencing as repeat offenders of the oversized vehicle ordinance are also individuals that have been resistant to enrolling in such a program. So if we create a level of using enforcement with outreach, we feel like we might have an additional level of success. We've also worked case by case on a few circumstances where there are associated fees to citations that we can actually forgive as the city. So we can't do that on behalf of the DMV, but we can do it as a city. And so we've committed, we have regular meetings with New Beginnings and with our county partners that we always work case by case if we are able to take that step to make sure, again, if they're enrolled, receptive, and saying, yes, I want to be housed, that we're doing and creating and removing every obstacle for them to be able to do that.
And Ms. Sneddon, may I add, first, those are excellent information provided by Ms. Anderson. The last portion of your question is really poignant because something we've thought about over the years, like is there, because we're dealing just with on-street parking, so is there a location, I think, I'm trying to guess that maybe that's where you're asking, where we could allow, at least for an on-street parking purpose, maybe, if that's the question. And it's something we always thought about, but I think the interesting answer to that question now is the result of seeing this for 3 years. Generally, there has been congregations in certain areas. And so if you allow that in a certain area, you see the health and safety impacts, the dumping of waste, the impacts to the neighbors. And so what you will have is, the community saying, well, not this street or not area. And we've seen that impact on that. So that is a question we've kind of always asked ourselves. And maybe now we've kind of removed that question from the table because in 3 years, we've actually seen what that actually translates to.
Thank you. And just one follow-up question. So say there's a vehicle and it has inhabitants in its oversized vehicle, has inhabitants who want to join a program, but there isn't room, or they're on a waiting list, or does that happen? Or is there room for everyone who wants to get out of their vehicle?
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, in terms of immediate getting their vehicle off a public street, those pathways are limited. However, as part of this ordinance, the police department shares information about the New Beginnings program, and we're continually meeting with and engaging with New Beginnings on individuals that are receptive. So I will say that communication loop is open, and New Beginnings works to place individuals in safe parking program spaces, even if they're in another city. So if there is receptivity, we will find that pathway.
Okay, so I guess I don't mean to keep doing this, but say there's a couple months where this hasn't happened, like the communication's happening, it's all getting set up, but I just want to know, what is the legal place for an oversized vehicle to go for the night to sleep? If they're like not in the list yet, something hasn't come through, there's pathways, they're existing, we're working on them, but in that period of time, I just can imagine somebody wanting to be law-abiding and wanting to know where to go, and they have their vehicle, what should they do? That's, I guess, my question. Where should they go? Out of town? Like, is that our answer, or is it, like, where should they go?
Mayor Pro Tem Stanton, we do facilitate transitions to emergency shelter. And New Beginnings has actually created a designated space to store oversized vehicles that do not have individuals in them. So again, if there is a yes, we find every pathway to support that yes. Only one individual has taken up the opportunity to store their oversized vehicle while they're in an interim housing situation. But I will say New Beginnings has been incredibly creative at understanding what the barriers are and being able to address them.
Okay, and so anybody who wanted to do that would have that option, and there's enough space for that?
The space capacity has not even been touched. I don't know what, it's not 300 spaces available. I honestly don't know what the total number of
Yeah,
spaces is.
thank you. That's my question. Somebody law-abiding, wants to do the right thing, is waiting for something to come through, wants to know where they can park legally, and they have options. Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Chair Gutierrez, Mayor Pro Tem Senate, the other part is, if you look at the recommendation on the screen, there's two parts. There's one part about changing back the ordinance to address the health and safety concerns. And then the other part is continuing and aggressively finding the alternate parking resources you're talking about. I think the reason they're there is they need to go in tandem, because we recognize if we're repealing one, we have to strengthen the other. And so I view those two bullets working together in tandem to address your concern.
Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Remind me on New Beginnings, you have to park overnight and leave during the day, every part of their program, right?
There's designated time periods for their programming, and to City Attorney Doimus's point, they don't overwhelm the number of vehicles that are in any space in any neighborhood at any time.
Right,
So
but generally they're parking lot ones, it's an overnight parking thing and they vacate during the day.
And they have daytime spaces as well.
Yeah, so, but probably, I don't know, I don't remember that that's really their function. It's more like an overnight thing, and their agreements are, the reason I just keep drilling down on this point is it seems to me we're holding New Beginnings as the carrot or savior, but I don't think the audience that we're talking about is a New Beginnings audience for a whole bunch of reasons, but primary, Quarantina Street or the underpass at Cali Cesar Chavez, those people are there for weeks and weeks and weeks. Those are not people who need somewhere to go overnight. They are there until they get thrown out of there, kind of thing. And so, I've always had some hesitancy against getting behind something like this, because really I don't see we're doing anything other than just moving them on to somewhere else, and I don't know where somewhere else is, and don't want it to be somewhere I don't like or somebody else doesn't like. And even if we move them on to another city, that's still just whack-a-mole. So I don't know, do you ever help me with this? It literally just seems like, I have occasion to drive down Quarantina 2 days a week at 7 o'clock in the morning and at sometimes 5 o'clock in the evening. The whole street is lined back to back with obviously oversized vehicles, and that happens to also be an entrance and exit for Marburg's trash trucks down there too. You literally cannot drive on that street because of those vehicles, but they have not moved in a year. They're the same vehicles I see every day. And how do we remedy, one, people that aren't looking just to go someplace and book in for the night and then find a place during the day, because I don't think that's there. And two, I don't even think those vehicles are moving. So what are we really going to do with them?
Before you respond, Chief Gordon, City Attorney John Doimus has something.
Sure, and I'm sure, usually I elaborate after Chief Gordon responds. I think she may do it this case. I just want to address one point because it kind of light went in my head, Councilmember Jordan. You said the term whack-a-mole. Well, that's, I think, what the ordinance, the amendment we did 3 years ago created the situation where it's because you're allowing to move 1,000 linear feet and all this, it has kind of created the situations and the examples you have given, the issues we're trying to address. And what has happened, and I'll completely be honest, is this amendment has put the police department in a very difficult position because they recognize, okay, well, they can comply by moving 1,000 linear feet. Like, who's going to go around and spend all the time in terms of officers, other issues, and making sure they went 1,000 feet? And it just continues on and on and on. And the goal was we were hoping to provide a softer kind of course or landing space to get people enrolled. But what happens is instead, because of this section that was put in there, has had the opposite effect of creating the situations that you just mentioned, you observed, and has put the police department in a very difficult situation, because who's to say that they didn't move 1,000 feet? I mean, you're going to be sending officers multiple times to check that. So what we're trying to do now is hit a reset after looking at these for 3 years, looking at these stats. This is part of this record that's being there, to take away that, to be able to address that, because now it's not like, it's just one warning, and you need to get help, and you need to, not keep just moving to being compliant. It's like after your warning and you keep your vehicles still on the street blocking, causing these issues, you're no longer in compliance. So that's why this ordinance is
No, I get
critical
that,
to address
but I guess my question is then, where are you? And I don't agree with you that the old way created what's going on, because those people are not moving 1,000 feet and playing whack-a-mole. Those people just are in one place and they're there forever. And I'm pretty sure my comment was 3 years ago, good luck with that, because it was just a horrible enforcement procedure ordinance. So go ahead. I'll get off my soapbox here.
Go ahead, Chief Gordon.
Chair Gutierrez, Councilmember Jordan, I think the whole point being is that 3 years ago when we did this, I believe I said then, and I will say it now, that this would create some significant challenges. And I think the result of the 1,000 feet and the multiple warnings is exactly the challenges and what we are seeing. The data supports what we thought the result would be. Because when you talk about who you see and they haven't moved, trying to enforce that at this point based on the 1,000 feet and the multiple warnings is extremely challenging. It's a no-win, and they know that. So we could hand out warnings like candy, but trying to actually do something about that with the way our ordinance is now is a no-win. And then they get comfortable, they know that our hands are tied in terms of enforcement, so there's actually no encouragement for them to actually take the next step.
So
Because right now, they know that there's only so much that we can do.
Where do you think they're going to go now that we have the upper hand?
I think a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them will actually go into and try the safe parking program. Others who just want to go someplace where there are no rules and they can do whatever they want will find a city that allows that, quite frankly. Because most of them are not those that are actually looking for services. We want to make sure that we are addressing those that want services and need services. We have the empathy and the compassion, the teams that we use. We work really well with New Beginnings and our partners, our community action team. We will send co-response out if we need to. We look at all the resources, but the amount of time and resources that we're spending of trying to enforce something that we can't actually enforce, what it's leading to is that those in these neighborhoods that actually live in these neighborhoods are coming to us because they're very frustrated.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing, is that we have to have an enforcement mechanism that meets both sides of this.
Okay.
Where we actually can enforce something, and at the same time, we can provide the public safety for those in the neighborhoods who are struggling with the fact that, they're sending their child to school, and they are walking by someone who is, unfortunately, using an outdoor toilet or all the things, or the sewer is spilling over, and we don't have an appropriate enforcement mechanism to deal with this in the right way. We still will be compassionate and empathetic. Our first goal is always to get them into services, but the only way for us now is we have to have something that gives them more of an encouragement to make a choice.
Okay, well, I'm not going to stand in the way of this, because whatever it is, it's an improvement over what we said good luck to you now 3 years ago. It's just, I just don't believe that hiding behind New Beginnings program as they're all going to get handled or they're going to go into housing. You know, if you can get some people off there and they're going to New Beginnings, they have to vacate at 7 or 8 out of a private property parking lot the next day, and their only option after that time is to go right back on the public street where we're going to enforce one time only against them, and they have nowhere to go during the daytime. My feeling is just either you got to get rid of them, whatever that looks like to a compassionate or non-compassionate person, or you're going to be just enforcing against them, and to not a remedy, because they need to take those vehicles somewhere during the day also. I'll just get a couple of quick comments in. I think we should be spending time looking for parcels that could take vehicles on them that can sit there for a day and a night or a longer period of time. So not a structured New Beginnings program too. So, and just what rises up, I know they're just starting on a talking point for, in 5 years, we'll build a project with the Armory lot as a parking lot down there that the school district has. What that looks like to them participating with us to put people, I mean, I just know it takes one sewage dump to say we're not doing that anymore. So, and then Capital Hardware still has a project to nowhere, the old Capital Hardware, not the where they've moved down the street, but it still has a project to nowhere with paved parking in and around that complex, and whether we could tell people, yeah, you can't be on a public street, but we know a place where you can go to over there and somehow manage that. I think, and I can't think of any others in particularly on the side of town where I see this happening, but there must be others.
Councilmember Jordan, I want to add actually that federally owned parking lots are the emptiest lots that we have. So DMV completely empty in the evenings. We have a federal building on Cannon Perdido completely empty during the day and in the evenings. So we have a whole list of available lots that we've actually seen could have availability and have pursued outreach to those, the property owners and the parking lot owners to be able to facilitate these connections with safe parking. So there has been a huge concerted effort for us to expand the available spaces, and that continues on regardless. The Armory has been brought up multiple times, but because of its proximity to a number of youth-serving organizations as well as high school and junior high, it actually is not the ideal location for such a program. We do think that there's other lots, though, that we can keep pursuing. Yeah.
Probably Capital Hardware's too close then too. It's right there backing up.
And Councilmember Jordan, just one final point I'd like to make is I think it's important. I get the frustration in terms of the prediction of like when this change was made 3 years ago, this is the place would be. And we also came there from a place, I've heard the word empathy, which is a good point. I think at least, considering the city has been sued 6 or 7 times in this issue, it at least puts us in a better position to show a court, show the record, like we've tried alternative things and these are the results. And now with Grant Pass there, it's something for us to point to. So there is some value of what happened in 3 years, because it shows what maybe you thought, other people thought that did happen, and be able to show a court the results of such a mechanism. So I think there is value in that, and does put the city in a better position of at least trying it.
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up to that. I think as long as we're pursuing New Beginnings and these other routes, and I would say if there are other parking areas too that aren't at the level of New Beginnings, but certainly some sort of movement toward entering a program or making efforts. I would just be concerned that word would get out that we have a large RV parking lot that is open and free, and I think a really important part of that would be moving toward moving out of vehicles and with support and with programs. So appreciate that consideration.
And Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, I just want to add briefly, I've been overseeing strategies related to homelessness in the city for 4 years. The best combination of practices is both outreach, shelter capacity, housing navigation, with enforcement tools and mechanisms. We have to have the combination. It's the only effective way that I know we can actually make visible and measurable results in our neighborhoods. And It is unfortunate that the city of Santa Barbara experiences an exceptionally high number of people experiencing chronic homelessness, which requires, on average, 24 different engagements with individuals to be able to address their needs, the complexity of those needs, and to be able to build rapport and comfort to get them on that pathway. The fact that we have 2 years of data from New Beginnings, success, but we still have a number of individuals that are refusing to embrace a program that will get them on that positive path. We do need to have a shift in our enforcement tools and mechanisms to continue to use the combination of factors to have an effective strategy overall.
All right. Is there a motion to be made here?
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, seconded by Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. Motion moved by Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, seconded by Councilmember Jordan, that the Ordinance Committee review the proposed amendments and recommend that the City Council consider an ordinance amending Santa Barbara Municipal Code Section 10.44.220 to modify enforcement procedures for oversized vehicle parking violations. The recommendation also directs staff to continue coordination with the New Beginnings Safe Parking Program to provide outreach and alternative parking resources for individuals living in oversized vehicles. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I call the meeting adjourned.